You're watching the Real Football Network. I'm John Pollard, and this is Real Football Analytics. Well, we're through the first 7 weeks of the 2015 season, and we thought this would be a great time to share with you how we at Real Football take a look at quarterback play. In particular, we're talking about accuracy and passing. Now, you may think that we just simply look at pass attempts, incompletion, completion percentage, depth of pass. Actually, through our partners at Stats Inc., we can reference over 20 different reasons for an incompleted pass. Now, some of these reasons can range from a ball that's spiked on purpose, or a ball that's thrown away, out of bounds, or a pass defense downfield, or a ball even deflected at the line. We even get into the details of inaccuracy in terms of overthrows, underthrows, and wide throws. And that's the topic we want to get into today. We want to look at the top quarterbacks for the first 7 weeks in terms of accuracy when throwing the ball. We'll also look at the quarterbacks who are ranking at the bottom of the league through the first 7 weeks of the season. Let's take a look at the numbers. So let's take a look at the top quarterbacks in terms of lowest off-target throwing percentage for the first 7 weeks of the season. Before we get into the specific numbers and players, let's take a look at two of the specific columns. First off, on the right-hand side, you see percentage of overall incompleted passes. This is all overthrows, underthrows, and wide throws as a percentage of all incompletions. And as I mentioned in the open, the incompletions that we look at are over 20 different reasons, and they can include passes deflected at the line, balls thrown away on purpose, balls spiked to stop the clock. So these are all overthrows, underthrows, and wide throws added up and then taken as a percentage of total incompletions. The last column on the right-hand side is off target. This is simply all overthrows, underthrows, and wide throws, the sum of those numbers, divided by the total pass attempts. And as we're looking at the list, let's take a look. We all know that Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons have had a great year. And Matt is actually very accurate, only off target 10.5% of the time. And moving down the list, a couple I want to point out. We know the Arizona Cardinals and Carson Palmer's had a great year. In fact, he's had a great year because he's been protected really well by his offensive line. But of course, with time and protection and being able to plant and throw in a very calm pocket, Carson has actually recorded a very high off-target throw percentage or a very low off-target throw percentage. Some other names that you might recognize. Interestingly enough, I do want to point out Nick Foles. Nick Foles is the third most accurate quarterback in terms of off-target throws. And we remember, of course, Philadelphia traded Nick away to the St. Louis Rams in exchange for Sam Bradford. He's not on this list, but Sam Bradford falls just outside the top 10 at number 11. So through the first 7 weeks of the season, it looks like the St. Louis Rams did a pretty nice job getting Nick Foles in there in exchange for Sam Bradford. Also, I think it's important to point out, we know Andy Dalton's had a great year. You see him at the list, at the bottom of the list, Teddy Bridgewater and Derek Carr. I think it's a really good indicator of the development work of the Minnesota Vikings with Teddy Bridgewater and the Oakland Raiders with Derek Carr, creating game plans and schemes and passing routes to allow these young quarterbacks to develop over time, and they're doing it with quick, accurate passes. Now let's flip it over and take a look at the quarterbacks who have recorded the highest off-target throw percentage for the first 7 weeks of the season. And before I get into the details and the numbers on this specific list, it's important to remember again that the off-target metric is not the only way we evaluate quarterback play. As I mentioned, we have many different reasons for incompleted passes. There could be drops. There could be balls deflected at the line, balls thrown out of bounds on purpose. We also take a look at this information and we can divide it by or segment it by whether the quarterback was under center in the pistol or shotgun, where he was in the pocket, whether he's middle pocket or on a bootleg, whether he was under pressure or non-pressure. This is just a sample of the type of data that we use to evaluate overall quarterback play, and exactly the same type of data that many of the NFL teams and major college football teams use when they're evaluating their players or scouting an opponent's quarterback. One thing I wanted to point out here, we look at Andrew Luck. Obviously, Andrew's had a really challenging year, as have the Colts, and you see him, he's been off target with a lot of his throws. It's been suggested that his shoulder perhaps isn't quite right, and certainly the numbers bear out that perhaps scheme, the fact that he's getting a lot of pressure, and maybe he's not completely healed in the shoulder area, and that might be adding to his off-target throws. A couple of names you may not expect. I certainly didn't expect when I was looking at this list and creating the numbers. Drew Brees and Peyton Manning. Drew Brees has always, as I've studied these numbers over the last 6 years, has always been a top 10 quarterback in the category of off-target throw percentage, meaning he's always been in the low percentage area. This year, Drew finding himself at the bottom. It's the first time I've seen that in 6 years. Peyton Manning, of course, we know that there's lots of discussion about Peyton struggling with deep ball opportunities and so on and so forth. Well, certainly the numbers bear it out that, again, he's not necessarily the most accurate quarterback for the first 7 weeks of the season. Another name that we look at, Cam Newton, the Carolina Panthers have had a great season, but you see that Cam, he has been consistently plagued since he came into the league with throwing off target quite a few times. And one thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these lineups in terms of fantasy lineups or supporting your favorite team, off target throws can tend to translate to interceptions, not just incompletions, to keep that in mind. Now, as we discussed, accuracy and off-target throwing, it's not the only metric we use to evaluate overall quarterback play. However, it is an element that gives you an idea of how well a particular quarterback is playing. As we saw in the top 10 list, many of those quarterbacks rank across many different quarterback categories for the first 7 weeks of the season. Take a look at this information, evaluate your favorite quarterback, perhaps even use the data to set your fantasy football lineup. For Real Football Analytics, I'm John Pollard.